It looks like it's ready to go, Paula. Over to you.
Great, wonderful. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for calling in to this webinar. In March of this year, Ed Gavreau and I had the opportunity to go to Grassroots, which is the American Institute of Architects leadership workshop. And we heard about repositioning, and we wanted for each one of you to understand what repositioning was, to understand how you could affect the future of AIA, and to give you an opportunity through both of us to provide input to AIA. And I'll go over at the end of the presentation how you can provide input and make changes, either at your local level, at a state level, or at national level. So we'll go on to slide 2. Repositioning is an effort by the AIA to change the way it functions, to change the way it looks, and to change the way it serves its members and the community at large. In December of 2012, well, actually before that, slightly before that, AIA had hired a consultant because they did not believe that they were meeting the challenges of their membership. And so they undertook trying a survey of members, a survey of people at both the state, national, and local levels to understand where they might do things better. They had a lot of meetings in January and February of 2013 and then presented at Grassroots this presentation that you're seeing today. The consultant was very honest, and you'll see through here that they pointed out places where AIA needs to change and needs to reform. They initially started with AIA as a visionary member organization promoting advocacy, leadership, and resources for architects. And the advocacy part means also reaching out to the community or the public at large. The leadership means representing architects to governments and to other entities. And then obviously as a resource for architects means that continuing education is provided, and for what would be more traditional architects, documents and other kinds of literature. On the slide here it says AIA's designing, architects designing a better world. These were the goals that they wanted for AIA to achieve. Creating enduring value, both to clients and the communities at large. To drive a positive change, they wanted to collaboratively and creatively transform their clients' goals. Leading with a vision, so that we're not a professional organization that follows the trends, but a professional organization that is on more of the cutting edge of trends. And you'll see that this might be a little different from what we've done in the past. And now I'll go into the reorganizational assessment, what they found when they looked at AIA. What they found was that we have a lot of components. If you're familiar with AIA, you know that there are local chapters who primarily provide member services at a local level, be it education opportunities or meetings. And we also have state and national, and sometimes those different levels are disjointed, and there needed to be more connectivity. They also talked about how this organizational structure may not serve AIA in the future. They talked about how it's a little bit unwieldy sometimes, and that there's a lack of coordination. And if you are, as we all are in the government sector, public architects, sometimes what happens on the local and state level may not have much relevancy to you, and sometimes you operate more across sort of on a national level with people that are doing similar things to the things that you are doing. It talked about prioritizing AIA's goals for the future, so that AIA can't be all things to all people, and it must decide the programs and services that are most essential And here is where I want you to take note to the majority of the members. I think we have the opportunity to make ourselves a little more heard than the simple majority, and you'll see that as I go through the presentation, to urge you to write down ideas, to either send them to national yourself, or if they're better addressed at a local or state level, to send those comments to the appropriate people at those levels. Or if you want to send them to myself, or Ed is on the Public Architects Advisory Committee right now, to send them through him to have them looked at. Even though they say essential to the majority of the members, oftentimes the people that speak up are the ones that are heard. It also talked about how architects are sometimes, or the AIA is sometimes slow to take a stand on issues. You'll recognize this in the past, or maybe you weren't aware, but the founding of USGBC actually started within the AIA, and AIA didn't really jump on the opportunity, and that group broke off from AIA and became now what we know as the U.S. Green Building Council. So we talked a great deal at the leadership conference about seizing on opportunities. And then obviously within any organization, how you allocate your finances says something about your priorities. And some members noted that perhaps there's a little bit too much funding going toward the national level and more needs to be directed at local and regional levels. There were a couple other points that the consultant pointed out that AIA perhaps should look at changing. The one is dealing with and engaging emerging professionals. There's been a lot of discussion about how many people are graduating from school, architectural school, how many people choose to go into an architectural kind of profession, how many people choose to go into collateral professions or professions that might use their training but not necessarily be architecture, and how the architects are licensed and that process. So there's a lot of look at emerging professionals. There was also a look at communications, which is interesting. I find the AIA website sometimes cumbersome to go through. They've tried to revamp that a couple of times, and so that was one of the things that was pointed out via the consultant, and probably still has some work to be done and will be looked at why the AIA goes through repositioning. Next, you'll see organizational reassessment. If you're familiar with AIA, you'll know that most people serve for one-year terms. They might serve in a variety of positions moving up through the AIA. They might be a local secretary or treasurer 1 year and move up to a vice president position, then president-elect, and then president. But most people only spend 1 year in each of those terms. That happens at the national and state levels as well, which means that oftentimes those folks don't have a chance to really make an impact, or perhaps their impact could be greater if they had longer terms. So there's some look at tenure and agendas and how long people stay in positions. And of course, that has to be balanced, since it's a volunteer organization, with the fact that it is a volunteer organization. You might not be able to take off that much time from work. And also the AIA's national board is 60 voting members, which is quite large for an organization of AIA's size. And there's some discussion about making that board size smaller and doing that in a sort of a phased-in approach. So AIA is looking at all those things. There's some immediate action items that AIA is looking at as part of this repositioning effort. One is they want to get recommendations from the members. They held some component town hall meetings, and there are places on the website where you can turn in your recommendations, and these were discussed at the AIA annual business meeting that was held on Saturday in June, one of the last Saturdays in June. What they talked about on services was to analyze the delivery of member benefits and services, to realign them with priorities and what's required by members, to redefine roles and responsibilities for resource sharing, and then there will be a final recommendation for board action national board action in the spring of 2014. And as I said, they're looking at the organization and reorganizing it. They're getting recommendations from consultants and recommendations from members, and those will be implemented by December of this year. So that's some of the things they're looking at. They will have a emerging professional summit in November of this year with experts from across AIA itself, but also across the profession and academia to try and decide what the Institute can do to assist emerging professionals. And also there will be some research done into inclusiveness. And I would point out that this is important for public architects because they list gender here, but within the AIA structure, non-traditional architects are also seen as part of increasing that diversity. And Ed will talk about a proposal that he is putting together to allow public architects and architects that are in non-traditional practices to have more of a say, to perhaps have a little better dues structure. And so he'll discuss part of his recommendations for the inclusiveness, which might be something you want to comment on his or provide comments of your own. There will also be set up an innovation fund. If you know of other professions, often they do a lot of grant writing and they kind of innovate within their profession. And so AIA is looking to do more innovation, and they're looking for new programs that can be started and trying to leverage good ideas that people have. They have a fund that they've awarded different initiatives in different categories, and those will be completed, those initiatives will be completed by the end of 2014, and then lessons learned shared from those. You'll see next we have, I want to make sure I get it in the middle of the screen, repositioning ambassadors. There are obviously your regular officers within your local chapter, state, or national, but there's also a 40-person group that was selected by the board, and they represent each region of the country, and their names can be found on the website. I wasn't going to go through all 40 because wherever you are, you'll have to find the person that is your representative. And they are charged with taking input from the local and the state and the regional levels and providing that back to the board on what members would like to see. So you can provide comments to these people as part of the repositioning effort on things that you would like to see them change. Also, AIA is going to work on a communication strategy to streamline their vehicles and to come up with a system for how they put information out to members. You may feel, and it was brought up in the survey of members, that AIA sometimes sends you many emails and you're not sure which one to read, and so sometimes you just ignore many of them and miss information that you might want to take a look at. Out on the AIA website, and I was very impressed with this, is an annual report from 2012, and it highlights, we've talked a lot in this presentation about things that perhaps AIA isn't doing well, and wanted to point out a couple of places where they are doing well. So in the next couple of slides, you'll see this is some pages from their 2012 accomplishments. You'll see the public architects And Architects for Humanity have a memorandum of understanding that connects architects with pro bono opportunities, allows them to help society as a whole. At the National Convention, they had a presentation on the Architects for Humanity group, which was very instructive on how people can get involved and really go out and affect their local communities and communities across the world with part of this work. Also, they have Laying the Groundwork, which is a look at global urban solutions and focusing on health through the Clinton Global Initiative. And they have 3 grants that were given in partnership with ACSA that look at urban and health-related things, which was very good. The Latrobe Prize, which is, if you do research, it's the highest prize that AIA offers, was targeted toward healthy design and a 12-year history of funding research. So that is good things that AIA is doing. Go on to the next slide here. And also, the AIA and the American Association, the Architectural Association Foundation gave scholarships to 42 students, 67 matching scholarship grants. The 42 scholarships to students go to students. The scholarship grants, if you're not familiar with them, go to local AIA components to do initiatives. So for instance, when I was president of the Hampton Roads chapter, we applied to this program and got a grant to help come up with ideas and strategies to renovate Granby Street, which is a main street in Norfolk, which had fallen into disrepair during the 1970s. It had quite a number of boarded up buildings and undesirable populations. And we had an initiative where we got ideas and designs and concepts thrown out for the entire street. Now the street is renovated and it's bustling with business. Certainly not just due to our initiative and the grant that came from AIA, but as part of that. And also, if you travel to Norfolk, you'll see that they have a light rail system. Public wasn't very supportive, and so a grant from AIA was used to create 4 televised radio programs on mass transit and the benefits of mass transit, to bring in big name speakers and to do a charrette that looked how you could create mass transit stops that integrated with the community. And therefore, as part of that initiative, mass transit and light rail was approved for Norfolk, and now they're going to extend it to Virginia Beach. So a success that had at least part of its beginnings with the AIA. Also on the right-hand side, you'll see several thousand, 26,000 new courses were reviewed and added for continuing education, which hopefully helps you out at the local level. So these were the accomplishments that AIA brought out, not to only point out its bad points in repositioning, but to point out good things that it was doing. Now if we go on to next steps, what the AIA is doing is asking for your input. And I would highly encourage you, be you an AIA member or not, if you're an architect, or I guess not an architect, give input to AIA and what you would like to see, how they can help you better in your professional life. There are your local leaders at the local level and state level. If you don't know where to find them, I can help you find them if you want to email me at paula.j.loomis@usace.army.mil. If you go out, you can also, on the national website, you can find your ambassador, your repositioning ambassador that's for your local area. If you happen to be from the Virginias, it is Susan Brain, and I can give you her phone number and email. She'd be happy to hear from you. Ed is now going to talk about perhaps the initiative that he's come up with and some ways that perhaps AIA might change. I would encourage everyone to think outside of the box when you give your ideas to AIA, not only what might seem the easy things to do, but they're truly thinking about changing. So give them a lot to think about. Ed?
Thank you, Paula. Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Always check with technology, trust but verify. Anyway, just a couple observations in this repositioning effort. Just in case anybody's not sure, grassroots is where all the component executives from across AIA gather. And I can tell you, they were pretty excited by what was presented and also what some of the initiatives that were being forwarded as. Then at the convention, there was still a great amount of enthusiasm in terms of that, because then you put it out to the membership. One thing that I noticed out of the membership, when we mentioned before about bringing other professions in, AIA passed a resolution as part of the business meeting where they are now going to allow allied professionals, give the local chapters the option to allow allied professionals to join local AIA chapters. That, I think, is going to be great because then it starts getting the synergy from other professions in there, which, quite frankly, I think is sorely needed and also is going to help energize AIA in terms of its initiatives. As to what I've been doing with the public architects knowledge community, what the immediate thing I was working at was for next year's workshop, which will be in Chicago. We're going to actually play by the AIA's rules for once and actually use their format for doing 2 half-day seminars, where we're going to split. One half is going to be for dealing with those in government service, and then the other one is going to be dealing with folks who do non-traditional or institutions. And one of the ones we're hoping to get will be with the Art Institute of Chicago as well as the University of Chicago. So that should be fun. The most immediate initiative that I'm working on now was something that I sort of instigated when we had the workshop this year. We had Jeff Potter, last year's president, in, and frankly, I laid the groundwork to allow folks to start, shall we say, vent a little bit about issues that they had. And so after a few, I finally spoke up and said, it comes down to the fact that we're looking for the value proposition for non-traditional practitioners, which would be for USACE architects, to join AIA. So out of that discussion, Jeff and I sat down for a little bit afterwards, and we had a little discussion, sort of went over some points, and so sort of cut a deal with him. The deal is that he's willing to carry the water for us to the national board on issues. But at the same point, I'm on the hook for producing an information paper, which is going to sort of lay out some of our concerns, but also have possible remedies laid out that we can pursue. I do have the paper. I have sent it out to some of the folks in the knowledge community for their input. And if anybody's interested in taking a look at the paper and offering their 3 cents to it, I will have my email address included on the information afterwards. You can email me and I will be more than happy to send the paper to you. Other than that, at this point, that's all I really have. Certainly, some of the folks I work with is that we have the master planners that work. Oh, okay, I guess we have another guest wanting to come in. So, and I just would like to open the floor up. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Ed, this is Paula. I'll share one additional thing that came out of the National Business Meeting that was also elected in, and that is, it used to be that to serve in an officer role on your local chapter, you had to be an AIA member, which meant that you had to be registered. And they loosened that up a bit, and they're now allowing architects that still need to complete licensure to serve. I don't believe they can serve in the president's role, but they can serve in many of the other roles, which now opens up a lot of opportunities for people at the local level.
Thanks, Paula.
And Ed's adding his
No
email
question.
address to the right-hand side of the screen there if you need to contact him regarding what he spoke on.
Sure. Well, I was going to add some background and history, and I will stop when I see questions coming up. You'll see in Ed's paper that you get that there are several proposals of different kinds. One of them that probably has a lot of interest is perhaps a different kind of dues structure for the AIA. Currently, people pay local, state, and national dues, and you belong at your local level but are required to pay your state and your national dues. A number of years ago, there were several attempts for public architects to say, you know, we don't really use all of those resources, particularly at the state level. People that work for the federal government may not use a lot of the AIA resources at the state level. So there was an initiative to have public architects just pay local and national. That went to the AIA's yearly meeting probably about 10 years ago, and it was voted down. And the reason it was voted down was not because there wasn't some support there. I think there was good support from the AIA leadership and the AIA staff, but many of the small practitioners pointed out that we that are employed by the federal government probably make as much or a little bit more than they do, and so therefore they didn't consider it to be equitable for us to get a break in dues. Now with the repositioning and the relooking at the entire AIA structure, perhaps the whole governance structure will be rebalanced. There are many knowledge communities. 10 years ago, there weren't that many knowledge communities, so there's many knowledge communities that work on a national and an international level. And so the way that everyone pays their dues might be changing. And so Ed's proposal that perhaps we relook at that question with a twist might be in our future.
Hi there. We're looking. I see, but we got about 34 people in on the list, and say, oh, we have somebody raise their hand. Okay.
Let's see how we. Oh wait, that's not what I need. I can. Here, I'm enabling your audio, Brian.
Brian?
Go ahead and talk. Are you there, Brian?
Hit the little mic up at the top of the screen.
Doesn't have audio. Okay.
Got it.
All right, Brian, I'm reading your question right now, or your comment. You're saying I can discuss that okay, you're with the North Alabama chapter. Okay, that's good to know, Brian. You're probably going to get a copy of the paper just for you to take a look at.
I also wanted to point out why we're at a little bit of a stop. The public architects is the knowledge community for architects that work in the government sector. So it can be federal people that work for the federal government, state government, or the local government. And they are looking often for volunteers to help with things. So by all means, go out and put them as one of your knowledge community interest areas, and then contact Ed if you're interested in helping. He'd be more than happy to have you get involved. They also have a newsletter called Cornerstone, and you can submit articles for Cornerstone. So if you did something great at your local district or division and you want to let everyone know about that, that would be wonderful.
I'll add to that. If you have something, you can send the article to me. David Trevino, who is with the City of Dallas, is this year's editor. But if you submit me, I will make sure that David gets all the information, and we'll go from there.
And I'll also, before we look at hanging up, and if anybody has any more questions, I'll also throw in how I got started with the AIA, and that was I just went up and volunteered to the gentleman who was president at the time that I'd like to help, and I'd help any place. He gave me the Design Awards program for the local chapter, and I did that for 1 year, and then I actually got to be, amazingly enough, vice president the next year, president-elect, and then the president of the local chapter after that. So I skipped a couple of steps in there. And there are opportunities out there. Being involved is a heck of a lot better than just being on the end of an email.
I'll second that, Paula. The way I really got into AIA is when I initially joined, I found the public architects, and shortly after I got my AIA membership, I was able to hook up with the committee. And to give you at least a historical perspective at this point, within about a year or so, the group I was within came up with what is now known as the Thomas Jefferson Awards, which is given annually for folks for architects and for private citizens who give outstanding service in the name of public architecture. And so, and then also, if you were aware of the GSA Design Excellence Program, Ed Feiner, who was we started that in the late 80s, and of course that has been a tremendous success ever since. But yeah, if you show up and say, hey, I'm willing to help, believe me, there's plenty of stuff to do.
Good. I don't think I see any questions out there. We can wait around for a couple more minutes if anybody needs to type anything in, or raise your hand if there's something you're working on typing. Otherwise, we'll end the recording in the next 2 minutes. And I guess I'll add on that website where you can get this recording, that's on the right-hand side. It's under slides, quizzes, and recording in bold.
Kelly, you don't happen to know what's next week, do you?
We don't have one scheduled next week. It's the week after, so that will be on the 30th of July.
Okay.
Just a second, we'll announce what that one is.
While Scott's looking up the topic, I'll also add as a note, in 2 weeks I'm going to be down in Atlanta. AIA is conducting a meeting of all 20 some odd knowledge communities, and we're all going to be able, a couple of days, sort of be able to brainstorm, build relationships among the different communities, and come up and basically build off of the repositioning, because I know that there's at least a third of the knowledge communities have architects who are in non-traditional practice, say in education, the corporate architects. In fact, the chair of this year's public architects, she's worked with the court system in California.
Yeah.
And so bear with us for a minute. We just lost the connection on the other computer. But I'm hoping at this point is that AIA as an organization is going to be serious and really move forward with this initiative to reposition. We're to the point where we have to be able to start doing something, or like I said, we're not going to be a leading organization, we're still going to be a follower, and we're no longer can afford to take that. And I believe we have the topic for next webinar.
So the next webinar will be on July 30th, same time at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, and the topic will be on longevity issues with solar panels presented by DuPont. Thanks, everyone.
Wow, we go from conceptual to really detailed.
Well,
Thank you.
it's the joys of diversity within our profession. Oh, well, we got somebody